All right, so you've been looking to buy a home or you're headed out to buy a home. You know we're headed into the competitive spring market over the next couple of months. What on earth is an appraisal gap and why would you need one? Stick around, we're going to get into that today. Hey, what's up guys? It is your realtor Nick Isgro with eXp Realty here in Central Maine. Now, as I stated, today we're going to go over the good, the bad, the ugly of what is an appraisal gap and why would you ever need one, particularly in a competitive market, and how could it help you win those competitive offers. Now, before I get into that, I do want to welcome you to the channel, or welcome back to the channel. And if you've been here before, you know on this channel, we cover all things real estate here in the state of Maine, particularly in the Central Maine market. If that is of interest to you and that adds value to your process when buying and selling a home, please go ahead, hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the alarm bell, and you'll be notified when we put out new content. All right, so an appraisal gap is something that is only going to happen in certain situations and in certain markets. Now, the markets that it's going to happen in are these really extreme seller's market, low inventory markets like we've been having over the last couple of years and like we are projecting to have over this upcoming year. All right, now before I get into that, I'm going to cover a little bit of basics about appraisals here. And if this is a bit of a review for you, no problem at all. Stick with me here because it's going to be worth it. But if not, just pay attention to here because this is going to be an important laying ground before we get into the actual appraisal gap itself. So let's just say you find a home that you just really love. You really want the home, and the home is listed for $300,000. It just so happens that you've been pre-approved by the bank to get a loan for $300,000. So already you can see there's no difference between the price of the home that you want and what you've been approved for to lend. Now, the bank is not going to lend you any more money than that house is worth. So in this situation, you really need to know that the house is worth $300,000, depending on what you have for a down payment. So a couple of weeks go by, the bank sends out the appraiser to actually put a value on the home. The appraiser goes through all of that, and it turns out that the appraiser appraises the home for $250,000. So now you have a $50,000 gap between the value of the home and what you offered to buy the home for. Now, in a lot of scenarios as this is happening, what the buyer is going to do, and what I would recommend you always do, is go back to the seller and try to negotiate that difference, try to negotiate that price down, particularly if you don't have the cash to outlay to make up for the difference. This is where the appraisal gap comes in. The appraisal gap is when you make an offer on a home, you tell the seller that you're going to be willing to make up the difference between what the home appraises for if it appraises low. Now, this could be a little risky, but it also has a reward, so let's talk about that. I always like to cover the bad news first, so let's cover that. The risk on this is that you end up buying a home where you start out with a negative equity position. So how does that happen? Well, you've bought the home, let's say you buy the home, let's say you offer $310,000 on a $300,000 home. That home appraises for $300,000. You've offered the appraisal gap to cover the difference. You've said, we will cover up to $10,000 difference if it appraises low. It does appraise low. Well, now you've put that cash out there. You're not getting the cash back that you've put down in the home, but your home is only worth $300,000. So you have that $10,000 of negative equity on the home. And this right here is why I would never just go to a client and advise that they do this. I think this is one of those things that it can be an incredible tool to win a multiple offer scenario, but this is really something that you want to work out between A, what your comfort level is, B, you might want to talk to other professionals like your accountant and things like that to make sure that this is a wise decision for you. Now, as we know, the equity based on not only your payments, but an increasing market is going to probably catch up with that. In a market like we have right now, where like last year we saw a 10% or more increase in most people's home values, you would have made that up. A lot of people that bought homes last summer and people thought they were crazy for offering over asking price, by the fall they had already made up any negative equity because the homes had already appreciated. That's not going to happen in every market, and that's why I say this is really a personal decision for you and you just want to do your research, but it is a tool available. So let's talk about why there's a positive to this. Well, as we know, we have extremely low inventory right now. There are just not a lot of houses on the market. Over the last year, at most, we had about 2 months of supply in the market. Last month, we had less than 1 month of supply in the market. But we also know there's a whole backlog of buyers that are continuing to be there, ready to do multiple offer scenarios on any given house that you see at any given time. So if you find that house and it is your dream house, this is the house where you're looking at and you say, yes, this is the house we want to buy, this is the house we've been dreaming of, we do not want to lose this, this could be a great tool for you, because then you can offer over asking price, and then you can offer the appraisal gap to say you're going to make up the difference, assuming that you actually have the cash to make up the difference and you're willing to let that cash go if you need it. Now, what we're seeing a lot is that a lot of times in this market, appraisers are, for the most part, keeping up. Some appraisals are capping out, but a lot of houses that seem like they're going to appraise low or might be marked high are actually appraising, because by the time the appraiser gets there, there's already other comps on the market that make it that price. But should there be a shortfall, you've already covered yourself. Well, if you're the seller and you're looking at an offer like that, just think about it from their standpoint. They're going to look at your offer, and if you're way above asking price, that might seem appealing at first, but their realtor, assuming they're a professional, is going to look at that and say, well, yes, that's great, but we also have to make sure that it's going to appraise for that, depending on what their financing look like. But let's just assume they're coming in with the, like a 3% down type scenario, which is something that's very common in the market that we see right now. And you really need that house to appraise. Well, if that person offers the appraisal gap, if that's you offering the appraisal gap, the seller is going to look at your offer and say, wow, I've got a great safeguard here. I don't need to worry about a low appraisal because these folks are offering to pay me the difference regardless of whether it appraises or not. So in that case, it can win you the house. And like I said, in most case scenarios, over time, you will get that equity back, but it might just not be right away, depending on the market and what you're making for payments and what your payment plans and things like that and so forth. And in fact, I actually just represented sellers that we sold a house that we got an offer that had the appraisal gap cooked in. It made my clients super thrilled to accept the offer because they knew if the house were to have a shortfall in the appraisal, there was like a $20,000 appraisal gap offered, they just weren't worried about it. Now, it turns out the house appraised, which is going to happen in a lot of common scenarios, but they had the security blanket of knowing that if it didn't appraise, this deal was still moving forward. They weren't going to have to go back to the drawing board. It was going to close at the price that was offered. So that's really it. It sounds very complicated. You hear these terms in the market like appraisal gap. What is an appraisal gap? It's a very simple tool that could help you win a multiple offer scenario. It's not something that necessarily I recommend to everybody. I always recommend that you do your own research to make sure that it's a tool that's right for you. But if it is right for you, it could be a wonderful thing and help you close the deal and get the house of your dreams. So if you're watching this video and you are in the market right now, if you're a seller that has ever dealt with an appraisal gap, if you're a buyer that's in the market right now, or you're a buyer who has actually bought using an appraisal gap, please go ahead and drop a comment below. I always love to get the feedback of people's personal experiences. It always helps add to the content that we're putting out and get great discussions going there. As always, guys, thanks so much for sticking around to the end of this video. Again, my name is Nick Isgro with eXp Realty here in Central Maine. And until next week, see you next time.